Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Vital Update. It's another episode of our kind of extended program today. It's right in the middle of October. We're in the middle of Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and I've got a really good friend of mine, Ryan O'Hara with Sphinx Cybersecurity, on to discuss some things with us. Ryan, thank you for coming on today.
Thanks for having me. Before we get started, I just got to say, I love your countdown timer and your intro video. So I'm going to need to hit you up for some ideas after that. I was just like, oh, mine's so boring.
I'll send you a link where we got where we made some of that stuff from. It's pretty good. Well, Ryan, thanks for coming, man. We just wanted to talk to you a little bit about obviously Cybersecurity Awareness Month is the month of October every year, and we're definitely trying to just raise awareness to our clients and end users about what cybersecurity is and how they can best protect themselves. And you're actually a colleague that we met through a program that we're part of that kind of keeps us up to date with the latest and greatest in cybersecurity. And just kind of give me a rundown of kind of how you got started in the business. And I know you went through a rebranding a couple months ago, or we did the same. So kind of tell me a little bit about how you got started and where you're at today.
Yeah, about a year ago, we did the rebrand. So started the company in 2009, coming out of corporate IT and looking to provide that same level of support to smaller businesses. Kind of just got bored of the daily grind of corporate IT. It's kind of like dealing with the same problems over and over again. So whereas small business is a lot more interesting because you kind of each client has their own individual interests and problems as a result of that. So that was kind of the idea. Ended up moving. So that was at that point more of a break fix kind of model. So they call us when something breaks. Kind of a lot of putting out fires. And around 2012-ish, we made the switch to a more proactive approach of a managed service model. So at that point, as you know, the job is to keep the machines from breaking in the first place. So a lot less putting out fires, more predictable. It was a lot more fun keeping things going than it was, having to scramble every time things broke. And then, as you mentioned, we did the rebrand from Sphinx Technology Solutions last year in October. We actually used Cybersecurity Awareness Month to launch the new brand to Sphinx Cybersecurity. And a lot of that was really just kind of catching up the brand with what we'd been doing. So we made the switch to more of a security focused model about actually almost 3 years ago now. It seems like time's flying by, and obviously COVID did a bunch of things to speed that up. So I'm really glad we started making that switch before then because we were able to hit the ground running with the threats that were coming out as a result of that.
That's a very similar story timeline of kind of what we've kind of experienced as well. We in 2019 was kind of when we started making our transition into the cybersecurity model, which is just, I would say, still in its infancy.
Oh, yeah.
to some degree, or at least from businesses trying to react and mitigate cybersecurity incidents.
Yeah,
hackers are way ahead of where businesses are.
Well, you mentioned, the whole purpose of this and Cybersecurity Awareness Month in general is to educate and get the word out. And that's really half the battle we're seeing these days is there's so much to keep track of and keep up with. It's a lot for people like us, and it's even more daunting for the end users and business owners to kind of keep track of. Especially over the last year with everything coming out, some people have just gone numb to it. You see one breach story on the news, and then there's another one a couple days later. So they're just becoming numb to it, and keeping people educated to understand what the risk is.
Well, and I think the turning point, at least for, I think, around here, more people understood the ramifications of it when that Colonial Pipeline happened.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then that was like, people started talking about, oh, this could affect the supply chain. This could affect this. It kind of brought up a more natural conversation about why cybersecurity is important. And I think, COVID too, also, I think we've kind of had like the perfect storm of a bunch of different things that happened that kind of brought this to the forefront of some people's minds. And even in the small business, a lot of people, beforehand were like, oh, it's just, it's big business. Why are they going to come after me? We hear that all the time. And it's just, the reality is they're not caring who they target. They're just in it for the money and the
No, and if anything, the smaller the company, the bigger the target they are, just because, one, there's a lot of them, and two, they typically don't have a whole lot of security in the first place. So hackers are lazy. They're going to go after that low hanging fruit every time. If they hit 10 small businesses, they're making as much money as that one large business that probably was 10 times as much work to get into. So small businesses are really, really at risk right now.
Yeah, and I mean, even another emerging thing that's out there is cybersecurity insurance, and you're talking about a lot of businesses that I come in contact with don't even know that that's an option.
Mm-hmm.
And then if they do know it's an option, a lot of them either have an older policy that maybe hasn't been updated or reviewed, or they're assuming that some of these claims that they try to make are going to be paid when they don't even know what the policy says.
Right.
As far as like, hey, you have to have these certain things in place, certain precautions in place for us to be able to pay a claim. We're seeing that more. I mean, that's changing.
Oh, for sure. It's regulation through insurance. So, kind of going back to, what I was saying about switching my model to security and being glad that I started that process prior to COVID. It's the same kind of thing right now. I mean, it's coming. The insurance, I mean, the applications that we're seeing for cybersecurity insurance today are totally different than they were 6 months ago and different from a year ago. They're asking for more things. It's essentially regulation by insurance, and companies are going to get sideswipe with this and not be ready for it. And now's the time to start getting ready for it, because it's going to be a requirement one way or another coming up in the very near future.
And so today's actual tip. So every day we've kind of been going and talking about a different aspect of cybersecurity. And today, one of the things that is on there is you're knowing your storage options and only storing things in secure places, which is an interesting segue, because a lot of times you put your insurance policies or you'll put all of your corporate documents and things like that in a shared environment online. Mm-hmm. And sometimes people don't even have that stuff in very simplest terms protected.
Right.
If they put it up in a Dropbox account or a OneDrive or something like that, and they're not having two-factor authentication, all your corporate, documents could be out there potentially if you're not securing that stuff. So I think it's very important not only knowing where you're storing things locally, but also what services are you using and how are you protecting those services.
Right.
I think that people use them as a convenience of, oh, my stuff's backed up, I don't have to worry about it. Yeah, well, what happens if you don't have access to that account?
Well, and they also tend to, whether on purpose or just not, lack of awareness, kind of go to the logic of, hey, it's in the cloud, so it's not my liability, it's the company that I'm using. So whether it be a Dropbox or Microsoft, and that's not the case. I mean, you look at those excuse me, terms of service, like they have no liability. And most of those products, while they're great, come out of the box with next to no security enabled. Like that's where you need somebody to be able to put those policies into place. We leverage the cloud quite considerably for our clients. And it's an ongoing chess game. I mean, it's not just a set a policy and forget it. You have to keep going in and changing things as systems update, as hackers update their methods and things like that. But if you just have your stuff in the cloud and think you're safe without having any type of security involvement in that, you're basically making it just as easy for the hackers as you are for your staff.
Well, and not that this is a perfect analogy, because I don't think it was a cyber issue, but look at when Facebook went down last week. I mean, that's unheard of for a company that big to go down for 8 hours, or and you look at what if that would have been a Dropbox or something, and you're not able to actually do anything because you can't get to your files.
Right.
So even having stuff in the cloud, it's still good to have backups of those cloud services as well.
Absolutely.
A physical device that you have access to. I mean, that's something we do.
I'd argue it's beyond good to have. It's necessary. You need to have those things. And if you look, Microsoft, for example, their terms of service, they even say right in there that they recommend that you have a backup.
Oh, and even a lot of people don't even realize that too, even about their email. I mean, Exchange. I mean, Microsoft absolutely recommends having a backup of your email services with them. So that way, if a box gets destroyed from ransomware or deleted, you have
Yep.
a copy of that you can have access to. So
that's something that a lot of people don't realize as well, that you can get ransomware in your email. Like, I mean, your email's in the cloud, but you can still get, the same kind of ransomware situation that you can get on a computer.
And I think that's the biggest gap that I see. And more, even more with COVID, with all of the work from home kind of things that transitioned and transpired over the last year. A lot of companies are basically making the determination, hey, we're not going to have an office. We're going to just work from home. And then that starts a whole nother conversation of kind of, now you're intermingling your personal devices and your work devices and your personal network with your work network. So really the education piece of what we're trying to do, it applies to everybody, even if you're not in a business environment. Even, like Facebook and LinkedIn and all that stuff, having two-factor authentication on even those platforms are very important.
Yep.
I mean, someone can basically hijack your entire life if they get access to your information. They can get all your contacts. They can send them solicitation for money. I mean, we see that kind of stuff all the time, which something as simple to us as turning on two-factor authentication could stop 90% of it on that type of a threat. And people just don't think about it, or they don't do it, or they think of it as an inconvenience.
Well, and it's something too, we're starting to see some of the providers, so you have, this random third party web service that you're using, and some of the providers are starting to, enforce on your behalf at MFA, which is great, but a lot of them don't. So we still will talk to people like, okay, make a list of all the web-based applications that you use, because it's hard to have visibility on that unless you're sitting over their shoulder the whole time. And then you go through this list, and half of them, they don't have multi-factor authentication turned on, and you go and look and it's like, okay, that company offers it, you just need to turn it on. So, and I think that's something we're going to see a little bit more, where the companies are going to, have to proactively enforce that as opposed to waiting and putting the responsibility on the user. But it's still something that, if it's available for anything that you use, turn it on.
And I know this is something you do for your clients as well. We do this for ours. But I think talking about what kind of the bigger companies are doing and enforcing that, as a small business owner, or really any business owner that you have out there, you should have those policies in place as well. It starts with the policy, right? How are we going to mitigate this? What are we going to do in the event of a breach? What are those things that need to be in place from a security perspective? That way you're not leaving that up to the employees to kind of decide for themselves I don't want to turn two-factor on. Well, when you're onboarding a new employee, you're walking through that process with them, saying, no, these are our security practices, and then this is why. And so we do that. We actually do some onboarding with some of our clients, where every person they hire, we actually sit down with, and we go through all their accounts, how to set up two-factor authentication, and we kind of educate them. But it's part of the culture of the company, and I think that's what we're seeing more and more of, is that's becoming part of the culture of companies that we're able to speak to as an outside provider, because it's tough. I mean, you see all the stuff that we deal with on a daily day basis, and it's like, if you have internal IT, that's even something that we work with internal teams, because they can't necessarily keep up with all the cybersecurity side of the world. It's a whole industry in and of itself.
I mean, a lot of times they don't even have access to some of the tools that we're able to use. So yeah, it's definitely something that people need to be aware of. And it's it can get more difficult with a smaller business. Some of them have been running things mom and pop style for a long time, and then you start talking about these different policies and procedures, and they just get freaked out as far as this is going to cost me a ton of money. Having a policy in place doesn't really cost you anything. You just need to do it and enforce it. And so some of that stuff is really, the easy, low-hanging fruit to get more secure and educate your staff. I mean, that's your weakest link every time is going to be the human factor. And it's going to be the staff that, isn't as invested in your business as you, the owner, are.
Well, and I think too, I've seen this meme before. It's like, the budget that you have before a cybersecurity incident is very small, and then the budget you have after is a lot bigger.
Yeah.
And so there's a happy medium between there that you can say, hey, we're going to, effectively manage this risk. We know it's there. We know it exists. We need to manage it. And it's part of it instead of just relying on
Right.
the recovery of it. And we're just seeing even now a lot of times we see people that think, oh, I have a backup, I'm good. Well, hackers are now figuring out a way to infiltrate themselves in your network to actually infect the backups as well. So
Yep.
even if you have a backup and you restore it, you're still infected.
They don't just get in there and shut things down right away. They get in there and sit around for a couple of months and do some research and try and figure out, what backup you're using, and then implement those plans to knock the backup out before they take things out. So yeah, it's a lot more sophisticated than it was, even a couple of years ago. So,
and I know they're putting stuff out on like Facebook and Reddit, and they have all these groups of these forums where they're literally hiring people and giving them kind of a playbook and a manual of how to hack things.
mm-hmm.
And it's just like I said, it's really becoming an industry in and of itself, and it's always this cat and mouse game. It used to be you could be relatively safe with antivirus on your computer 20 years ago, 15
Yep.
years ago, and it's just not that way anymore. And I think that's part of this whole month, and what we're trying to do is just educate the end user on all of these different things, in all facets of cybersecurity. So this today is like I said, the secure storage. What would be some recommendations that you would give your customers, whether that's physical storage or cloud backup? What's kind of the top 2 or 3 things that you would tell them that they need to be looking for to fulfill this particular request?
Sure. So like I said, we like to really leverage the Microsoft 365 cloud environment specifically. So typically when I'm configuring an environment for a client, we're using, SharePoint Online for all of their shared storage, and we're utilizing OneDrive for their individual storage. And then with those, then we implement a bunch of different security policies to basically lock things down. So that way, even if somebody got their username and their password and somehow managed to get past MFA, there are other things that we can do to lock that data down where, it has to be a computer that the system knows that's physically joined to that infrastructure. So it can't be, some hacker in Nigeria who happened to get past MFA and can still access this. And then we have layers where we're blocking it off geographically. So, somebody from overseas isn't going to be able to log into our system no matter what they have. And just really having all of those layers and protections, you kind of got to take a look at everything that comes out, every news article about somebody who got breached, and kind of look at what happened and then say, okay, the way that I've got my setup, are there holes where that process would have been a risk, and plugging those holes. So, any one system goes down, you got 2 more layers that are going to protect from somebody getting in. So that's really what we do. I mean, a lot of, as far as secure places, it's sometimes easier to talk about what not to do as opposed to what to do. I mean, our job is to configure things so that they can do it easily without having to think about it as much. But there's things where you go into an environment for the first time, and they've got a desktop and it's not encrypted, and they've got a Excel file on their desktop, like in bold letters, that says passwords, right? A colleague of ours, we were just hearing from the other day, was doing an assessment, and they found a spreadsheet on the desktop that had, I think it was either 300 or 3,000 credit card numbers for their clients. So they were taking credit card numbers, putting them into a spreadsheet, and then storing them that way. And that kind of stuff is not secure. I mean, I don't know in that situation if their hard drive wasn't encrypted, but that's something that a lot of people don't think about as well, is physical theft. I mean, it's a lot easier for somebody to take that computer, and if it's not encrypted, plug that hard drive into something else and read all of that data without a problem. So
that's a great point. That is a
great point. It's not like on TV where you see the hackers and they're able to hack into the NSA in 30 seconds. I mean, that stuff that takes work, it takes planning, it takes a lot of social engineering. It's a lot easier for somebody to just break a window, walk into your building, and steal your computer.
Well, and that's another thing that I was going to use this analogy, but typically businesses will have an alarm system, and I would say your antivirus of old is kind of like your alarm system.
Mm-hmm.
It notifies you when there's a problem, but who's monitoring it? who's notified when there's a problem.
It reminds me of those car alarms you hear going off in the parking lot. Yeah, it makes a big loud noise, and what does everybody do? They ignore it.
And I think that's part of the value that we can bring to the table with business owners is we're able to monitor that stuff 24/7. That we're immediately notified, like you were talking about Office 365. Well, if you get a successful login and you're never notified that someone actually logged into your account from Nigeria or from China or Russia, if you're not notified of that, you have no way of stopping it.
Right.
If you're not being proactive in what you're able to find on the dark web and things like that, you can't mitigate it. So, yeah, you could have the antivirus. You can see the alert on your computer, but how long were they in the system? When did they get access? How did they get in? And that's trying to find those answers and be able to mitigate it and stop it as it's happening or from future attacks is what's very important, and why it's important to have a team on your staff or work with a company like what we do that keeps up with that stuff.
And just an example with that, because I will tell that story every time to a prospect or a new client as we're getting them ready. But that story oftentimes kind of goes over their heads a little bit. So the story that I use that really kind of hits home for them is, and I've had this happen a few times. So we put those things in place and we have that logging. And so then, all of a sudden we get an alert that somebody logged in from Mexico. Okay. We take a look at it. We call the business. Is somebody go on vacation and forget to tell us? Oh yeah, and then they understand. Like we see an attempted login in Mexico. We do the research. We find out. Yep, it was just the owner who went on vacation and forgot to let us know. Okay, do you need access to your computer while you're there, or is this better? do you want to disconnect and not have access, and then we just leave the policy in place? But that's where it really clicks for them. Is like, oh wow, I mean, you guys really are keeping an eye on all this stuff.
And I think you mentioned something I wanted to come back to. You said setting up some security that is easy to use. And I think a lot of times people are like, I don't want to remember these passwords. I just want something simple. So they use their kids' names or their dogs' names. They use things that are easily guessable, I guess.
Yeah.
Because they see it as a hindrance, or our stance is, hey, you should use a different password for every login. And that is very cumbersome to some people. Two-factor authentication, I don't want to have to put a 6-digit code every time. So there are ways you can do all of those things. Password management system, Duo, different apps you can use for multi-factor that make the transition to security a lot smoother and a lot easier.
Yep.
And I think that's part of what we do as our industry has kind of grown and evolved, is identifying security issues and figuring out the easiest way for the end user to still implement them.
Absolutely, because you have to. It's necessary, because if you make it too hard, they're just not going to do it, and then you're shooting yourself in the foot anyway. I think this is something as an industry that is a struggle, because on one hand you have to have the security has to just keep going up. We're never going to go backwards with security. We're going to have to keep adding things, not subtracting things. And so I think a lot of this stuff is really starting to get better. The research going into it. I mean, Microsoft is doing things with passwordless logins and things like that. But really, it's all because of these different layers and these different pieces. So like I was talking about the 365 stuff. It's not just username, password, MFA, having things where it recognizes the device you're logging into and doesn't let a random one come in. So if you combine all of those factors and put it together, it just gives from a security level a better picture of yep, this is the person that is authorized logging in. So then we can kind of dial some of those things back to an extent, or at least make them easier for the end user to get in and use their machines.
Yeah, and I think that's what I try to make sure people understand from our perspective. It's I don't want this to be a hindrance to your workflow. Obviously, but also on the flip side, I don't want you to get ransomware and then you're really hindered from your workflow. So how would you rather be down for the 3 seconds extra it takes you to log in, or would you rather be down for the 6 days or a month that you're down if you get ransomware?
Well, and plus with some of this stuff too, I mean, if you implement some of this stuff properly, you're going to be saving them time with other things. There are some convenience factors rolled into having these things designed properly. So, that 3 seconds where, they have to log in, 8 more times during a day because we have a timeout when they walk away from their computer. They're picking up on the back end because everything, is able to sync for them, and they're, everything's right at their fingertips once they do log in. So it's just a matter of kind of seeing the big picture and being able to properly explain it. I think you hit the nail on the head early on. A lot of our job is education, whether it's letting people know what's out there and that they need to be protected, or educating them on the things that we're already providing for them that they may just not be as familiar with.
And the hope is, as we work with businesses and we work with the end users, and they understand more about why we're doing that, it actually allows them to secure themselves personally as well, which is kind of the whole point of what this month is about. Well, Ryan, I'm going to wrap it up today. It's been about 26 minutes. I could talk for.
I know. I was thinking we could probably roll on for like another hour and not even notice.
But anyway, I appreciate you coming on, and I'm sure we'll be doing some more of these in the future. Anything else you want to tell everybody?
No, just thanks for the time. I mean, like I said, education is a lot of what we do. So, anytime I get an opportunity to share some things and, maybe help a couple people who didn't know that, they had some risk in some certain places, I jump at that opportunity. So I appreciate it.
Yeah. And I look, I can't say enough good things about you and the team that we have in the background with all of our partnerships and people that we deal with. Having people like, if you're a business owner and you do not have a coach or an organization or a group of people that you can work with in your industry, it's highly recommended. I mean, this Absolutely. Is having, I know we went through a business review, a peer review of our business, and got some very good insight from you and some other people that were part of that. And I think that's a key part of it, is always to grow and to learn. And in this industry, you just can't keep up with everything. There's just,
the smartest people in this industry, still don't know everything. So being able to kind of operate and have, a hive mind kind of feel behind you, just makes all the difference. Knowing you have somebody where, hey, I'm not sure how I want to approach this or what's going on here, or, kind of get some industry analysis, but knowing that you have a team of people that you can reach out and say, hey, what do you guys think about this? And the ideas that come out of that are so much better.
Kind of a threat. Has this worked? And how have y'all mitigated this? And having that in the back pocket is fantastic. And that's one of the most important things I get out of the groups that we're involved in. And I think, if you're watching this and you deal with Vital, just know that we have an incredible team behind the scenes, not only our staff, but our support and our support network with people like Ryan. So definitely appreciate you not only coming on today, but being Absolutely. Part of that with us. For sure.
My pleasure.
All right. Well, y'all have a good one. We will be back on Tuesday with another Vital update. And then tomorrow we'll be doing another short snippet of a tip for Cybersecurity Awareness Month. See y'all next time.